So first announcement. I'll wait. Guys, now it's just the 8th grade. Thanks. Be the example. All right, so a couple announcements. The first one is meal packing is almost here, and fundraising for that, doing your service project, is almost completed. So drum roll, please. We'll see who's in the lead at this time. Servitas is in the lead right now. Also, as of like 30 minutes ago, Servitas was the first house to reach the $1,700 goal that we have for each house. So that's cool too. Remember, competition is cool, but what's more cool is being able to provide for people that don't have a lot. All right, second announcement, listen. Second announcement, FCA's in here. Next Thursday, you get a donut for just showing up. So next Thursday in the morning, it starts at 7:30, I think. Yep. Be here for that. And then the last thing is we have our House of the Month competition still. You get points for your house this way. For teachers, finding you guys doing something that it goes above and beyond, like an act of kindness that you have done. And that you get points for, and the winner gets a special prize too of the House for the House of the Month. All right, I'm going to pray and then introduce our speaker. So everybody bow your heads with me. God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for everybody being able to come here and just be united and be able to learn about you and hear what you have to say. Help us to have ears to listen and hearts to receive. Be with our speaker and help her to just relax and know that you got her. So in Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, give it up for Mrs. Kramer.
Okay. My PPLs, hello. All right, I am very nervous because there's a lot of people here. All right, so today, Chapel, Grace and Truth, still talking about that, but I'm putting a little bit of a twist on it. So the topic I was given was the disciples just didn't get it. And I was like, okay, I can talk about that, but I want it to be, I changed it up a little bit. So we're going to talk about Jesus showing graceful patience, which is hard to do. And we're going to talk about why that is hard to do, because people are irritating sometimes. So we're going to talk about that. But first, mandatory photo share. All right, because that's like a thing now that we do. Okay, so over here, that's my husband. He's a Cherokee Indian, if you did not know. Our cats literally are our children. So that's Sentinel. She's our baby. She adopted us, and she's 14. And then that's Zelda. We rescued him. He was bitten by a possum and just showed up on our doorstep one day. So we took him in, and he's 4, and he's upset that the 14-year-old cat doesn't want to play with the 4-year-old cat. But it's okay. These are my stepdaughters. That was almost really bad. So those are my stepdaughters, Lorena and Zoe. Lorena lives in Ohio, and Zoe goes to college in Pennsylvania. And then, because I am a winter person, I don't like summer. You all know, if you've had me, I don't like nature. Winter's my favorite because nature's non-existent. So I'm all about snow because I'm allergic to all of it. So I'm all about snow. If it snowed every day for the rest of my life, I would be so happy. That's me pre-COVID. Wore my hair down. And that's me in a helicopter. And that's the glacier that the helicopter took me to, and I hiked the glacier. Glaciers are really cool. And again, cold, snow, I was in my happy place. Which brings me to here. So last year, for surviving COVID, my family gave me a cruise for free. And I went to Iceland, which is why I missed the first week of school, but it's okay. And Iceland is really cool. So for example, one of the things I really love that they do, those are their traffic lights. The red light is a heart. And the heart, I know, and it's very cute. And so the heart is to remind you that when it's green light go again, there's pedestrians and there's other cars, so just make sure that you're always driving carefully. And I was like, that's amazing. That's how we should all be. So there's my mandatory photo share. Okay. So if you've had me, you know, it's always story time at Miss Kramer. All right, so here's the topic. So Jesus showing graceful patience, and that's hard for us to do. I mean, patience is hard enough, but to be graceful with it is really hard. So Jesus showing graceful patience is what I'm going to talk about. And even while the disciples were being very irritating sometimes and not getting it, Jesus never lost his cool with them about it. He was very patient and taught them. So which Miss Kramer's story ties in with that? The biting story. Yep, the biting story. Here we go. But it's going to be the shortened version. So once upon a time, when Miss Kramer was a small and adorable child, I was obsessed with the slide on the playground. And that was my thing. No one else really cared about the slide. It was super cool. It was the 70s, just go with it. And it had numbers on it, and it was wide enough for 2 kids to go down at the same time. Love the slide. And so one day I went out there, and there was this big line at the slide. And I was just like, there's never a line at the slide. So I was patient. I got in line, and I waited. I go up the stairs, and I get up there, and there is this girl who thinks she owns the slide. And she's got her arms out, and she asks you, all right, so what's the magic word? And everyone, they're saying ridiculous, and you're like, and everyone giggles because, we're in preschool. And she'd be like, oh, okay. And she'd put her arm down and let you go down the slide. Okay, my turn. So I get up there, and she's like, what's the magic word? I was raised right. I know what to say when an adult asks you, or anyone asks you, what's the magic word? What is the magic word? Exactly. All right, so I say please. And she goes, that's not the magic word. I'm sorry, yes it is. And I said, please. The magic word is please. Please, can I go down the slide? And she was like, no. Girl. So, I'm getting some kindergarten energy, anxiety, because she's not letting me go down. The people behind me are upset because they're backed up in the line, and they're getting on me, and she's getting on me, and I was just I was not backing down from this fight. I was like, the magic word is please. I know that's the right answer, because she wouldn't take it. So, I made a decision that we should never make, and I did not use my words. I used my mouth in a different way. I lost my patience, and I opened my mouth as wide as I could, and I clamped down on that girl's arm, and I bit for dear life. And my teeth, no, do not clap. That was not the right choice. Although, no, you know how the story ends. No, there's a price to pay for this. So, I did not mention at the beginning of the story that my mom works at my kindergarten where I was. See, there you go. So, I'm holding on to this girl's arm, biting down because I was angry, I lost my patience. And they had to go get my mom out of her classroom to come get me off this child. And so now, my mom, I'm sure, was mortified, and she has to do this walk across the playground. All the other teachers, I'm sure, were there looking and talking, and she's pulling me off this girl, dragging me across the playground, and I'm just screaming over and over again, but I said please, I said please, I said please. So, long story short, we get inside, I get punished, as you did in the 70s. My mouth was washed out with the worst soap you can possibly imagine. And I had to go back in and I had to apologize to her because, again, I did not make a good choice. I mean, as a 4 or 5-year-old, you're not going to have great patience, but I lost my patience with her, and there was a consequence. My mom lost my patience with me, and I still had more consequence. But that's kind of what I want you to think about, is how different could that story have been if I was able to have patience, if there was more patience shown in that story. Because I never got a chance to apologize to that girl. She did not come back. and I did not have a chance to make amends or make things right with her. So I know you're thinking, how could I ever do that? I mean, come on, I was sweet and cute. How could I ever have done that, right? Just saying. All right, so first things first. Thinking about that, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with what these words mean. So we have the same understanding about irritation, patience, and grace. So irritation, being annoyed with anything, situations, commercials, YouTube, homework, objects, people, anything. For some people, it feels like everything causes you to lose your patience. Why? Why is this a thing in our society? Because we live in a messed up world. And Satan is trying to distract you left and right from what we need to do, what we should do. And so our response matters in these situations. Don't give Satan a reason to giggle out of it. Okay. Patience. I was really surprised. So I looked up what patience meant, and it was not a positive definition. I thought for sure it would be positive, and it didn't sound positive to me. To tolerate without getting upset. And so I kept looking, and they didn't get any better. It's like, or accept to suffer without complaining. Well, it doesn't sound like fun either. So patience is really a challenging, hard thing to have, and it doesn't sound like it's fun to have. Add to that grace. Undeserved favor freely given. So it's kind of like what we talked about in the teacher panel, if you remember that happening before we had our nice vacay. But Jesus leveled that up, and he had graceful patience. So he showed undeserved tolerance, freely given, without any irritation. So for us, obviously that's not the easiest thing to do. But Jesus gave a lot of examples of when he was able to and what it can look like. The disciples. I love the disciples. I identify with, my two favorites are Matthew and Peter. Peter, because he and I both share some of, not the best qualities. We both are like, we'll throw it out there, we'll talk about it, we'll get all impassioned about things without thinking about the repercussions later. But that's why I love Peter. And then Matthew I love because, like, when you look through what he wrote, that's like the most detailed account. I like the details. You know, I'm a reality TV junkie. I like to know the backstory all the time. So I appreciate Matthew's attention to detail. But what was the big deal about the disciples is that they were willing to drop everything and follow Jesus when he asked, because I'm sure that was not easy. And sometimes they did make mistakes, or they just didn't understand what Jesus was trying to tell them. But a lot of times their willingness to stick with it made up for their mistakes, their weaknesses. So even though they didn't get it, or they said something they shouldn't have, or did something out of frustration, or without patience, or with anger, they at any time could have just been like, later, this isn't for me. But they never did. They stuck with it. And because of that, Jesus had to use a lot of graceful patience with them. But that's okay. Are we good so far? I feel better if I pretend I'm in my classroom. It's just a really big classroom right now. All right, so I wanted to give an example, but I wanted to talk about one that you probably don't learn about. Because I didn't want this to just be like, oh yeah, I've been there, done that, we know the story, yeah. So I tried to find something different. So you probably don't know about the big bread discussion. So that's where we're going to go really quick. All right, so one day, Jesus and the disciples, they're traveling. And so it says in Matthew that when they went across the lake, the disciples forgot to take bread, because that's like the easiest go-to to take with you back then. And Jesus hears their conversation, and he says, well, be careful. Jesus said to them, be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they're so focused on bread. I'm sure they're a little hangry. They didn't bring any food. They're hungry. There's nothing to eat. And all they're focusing on is this problem of, man, we don't have bread. And now Jesus knows that we don't have bread. So they discuss this amongst themselves, and all they could talk about was, oh, man, said that because we didn't bring bread. No, that's not it. So, oops, I went too fast. There we go. So what they heard, what they thought they heard Jesus saying, like what they read into it, was, man, Jesus knows we forgot bread. We forgot bread for the trip. Great. And he knows that we've messed up again. And now he knows, now, man, we're all going to stay hungry. And we shouldn't go by yeast. I don't know why he's talking about yeast. Apparently it's bad. Jesus said so. Like, that's what they heard. That's what they're focusing on. And Jesus is listening to this whole conversation. So they're upset with themselves. They're probably angry. And they're so focused on what they thought was the problem that they actually missed the point, which we can do a lot of times. So what they really should have heard was more like this. Remember that the words of the Pharisees are like yeast in the bread. Yeast is such a small ingredient, but it has so much power. That's what causes the bread to rise. That's what makes it look super awesome, yummy. Be on your guard with the true meaning of these words that can have so much power. Beware of the reasons for them being said, because we're going to encounter these men everywhere we go. So be on your guard for what they're trying to do and what they're trying to say and what they're trying to get you to think. So, little science backstory. Yeast is a small ingredient that determines, like, I call it the pretty poof level. Because I was a Subway sandwich artist back in the day. Different story for a different day. And one of the things I had to do was proof the bread. It's called proofing it. And I like to proof the poof. I was fascinated by it getting just like big and then just like the little wobbly little clouds. I thought it was so pretty. And then you'd bake it and it'd get even bigger. That's because of the yeast. So the yeast determines, I call it the pretty poof level of the bread. And it alone has the power and the influence over the end result of the bread. The Pharisees' words had the same, they thought, level of power. And they could influence people. Our words can have that power. Our words can influence people. So words, tiny, but also very important in how you use them. So, of course, Jesus knew that they missed the point. And he could have handled that so many different ways. All right, I'm going to look kind of crazy up here for a second. That's fine. So Jesus could have handled that with straight up irritation. I mean, glad you didn't like fight their arms like I did when I was a kid. But like he could have said things like that. He could have just been like, ugh, you guys are getting on my last nerve. This is absolutely ridiculous. Why can't you ever pay attention to anything I am telling you? We have been along long enough that you should know exactly what I'm talking about by now. Poof! Just put the knowledge in their heads and just be done with it. Like Jesus could have done that. He had the power to do that. He could have lost his patience with them and been totally irritated with them. Because we would understand that. We're like, oh yeah. The world would say, sure, that's how you should react every time. Or he could have had basic patience with them. Or remember, toleration, which again, to me is not a positive word, but he could have taken a deep breath for like the 100th time and just been like, look, don't focus on the lack of bread. Focus on the yeast and how that connects to the bread. And the Pharisees. I'm not telling you, don't buy the yeast. Oh. He could have done that, but he didn't. Instead, he used gracious patience. So his response was, how is it you don't understand that I was not talking to you about bread? But be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They understood that he was not telling them to guard against the yeast used in bread, but against the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, when I just fly through it like that, it kind of sounds like, that doesn't sound gracious or patience-like at all. So let me read it again. Because this is how I picture it coming out. Pauses, waiting for their full attention, so they're not still arguing about why They think it's weird. Jesus told them don't buy yeast, which is not what he said, but what they heard. And said slow and with a smile. How is it you guys don't understand that I was not talking to you about bread? Come on. Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And then they paused, they listened, they focused, they got it. This was not the only time that Jesus had to be graciously patient. There's lots of times. So Peter walking on the water, and Peter's all good, and he's thinking he's doing great, and then he looks down, and then he gets a little freaked out, and Jesus could have been like, sorry about your bye. But he didn't. He raised Peter up. Feeding of the 5,000, when the disciples were like running around like crazy men, and they were just like, oh my gosh, what are we supposed to do? We don't have enough food to feed all these people. What are we supposed to do about that? I don't understand. Instead of just going up to Jesus and saying what he wants to do, let's go. But Jesus showed them. Falling asleep at Gethsemane, Jesus could have just left him there, but he didn't. Peter's denial. And he came back and begged for forgiveness, and Jesus listened. Thomas's doubt when he came back. And still, he said, come here. Look, check it out for yourself. I know that's what you need to see. And he didn't have to do any of that. So ultimately, graceful patience is also a way that we can show love to each other if we can use it. Because that's, to me, what it was reflected in Jesus' words and his actions to his disciples, even when they were being really super irritating. So what does that mean for us? Well, thankfully, we get the same graceful patience offered to us, but you have to accept it. Acknowledge that it's there for you if you want it. We have the opportunity to show Jesus to others through our attempt at graceful patience. Share it. And sometimes that can be so hard, even in the smallest of circumstances. Because if you think about going through your normal day and how many times you get irritated with somebody or something, how hard is it to just go and keep going without ripping someone's head off? It can be hard sometimes. Share it. Also, let God know that you appreciate the gift. Rejoice in it. Use your manners, please, and thank you. I promise I won't bite you. So, my final thoughts about all of this. You guys are like scaring away. Okay, so here's the thing. So just real world talk here. Life is enough of a struggle bus challenge without people adding to it. So make it better for others, not worse. Show the grace, which again is so hard sometimes. I know. When 500 children ask me, did they miss anything? I know. Because I want to say, oh my gosh, I can't miss. But I try not to. But also, think of it this way. I hope you love God's love for you. Don't doubt it. Don't take it for granted. And that's the truth that goes with that as well. So, all I'm saying is, I know that there are days where it's really super hard. I know that there are days where you just look around and you're just like, why? Why do I have to do this? Why are we doing this? Why did I have to come here to do this? Why is this person not talking to me? They were talking to me yesterday. Why? And sometimes there might not be an answer to the why. But that's why we have each other. That's why we have grace. That's why we have truth to focus on, to help us. So, I went through that super fast because I am really nervous up here. But that's really what I wanted to leave you guys with, is just, you don't know what's going through someone's day. You don't know what everybody's going through. So if you can just be a little bit gracious with your patients, I'm sure that will go a long way. And you also